Good evening, and if you're just tuning in, you are listening to United Public Radio Network to the Angel Rock. I am your host, Lorilei Potvin. We're broadcasting to you out of New Orleans, Louisiana, but I'm actually up in Canada, and I'm going to introduce our amazing guest in just a minute. But she is so gracious to get up at 4 a.m. in South Africa right now, so thank you for joining us. But I want to give you a proper introduction. For those of you who've never watched a show before, the Angel Rock, I say I cover all aspects of the supernatural, whether it's UFOs to aliens to cryptids to the actual paranormal. But my show always has a positive spin, and I deal a lot with spirituality, angels, how to access your own intuition and gifts, and things like that. I also do a bit of truth seeking, and the guests that I have on are people from all walks of life, everyday people, but through their work, whether it's professionally or personal, they're making a positive change for humanity. Now, a little bit about myself. I am a Canadian psychic medium. I'm a crystal Reiki energy healer, Akashic Records practitioner. I'm a spiritual teacher and mentor, and I'm also a registered nurse. So, one thing I do want to do though, before we get started, I want to give a huge, huge shout out to the Freedom Convoy 2022 that is traveling all the way from the West Coast in Canada, the East Coast, from Southern Ontario. They're all heading to Parliament Hill. They should be there this Friday, and they are standing up for freedom and truth for Canadians. So drive safely, everybody out there. We'll see you when you pass through my city, Thunder Bay, on Wednesday this week. So, on to my wonderful guest here. Her name is Bridget Finklaire, and I'm going to read what you've got such a wonderful a whole bunch of topics here. But I do know as I'm scrolling that Bridget is an author. We're going to talk about her amazing book, The Red Dress. She's a spiritual teacher with almost 30 years of experience. She's a qualified and experienced hypnotherapist and psychotherapist and healer, and was a professional therapist in London's Harley Street. Bridget left England in 2012 for Cape Town, where she now lives with her South African husband. She loves teaching, writing, and speaking. Weaving together the threads of her spiritual and professional journeys, she designed the Bone Circle, a unique, transformative, and life-changing program that ties together three significant areas of expertise: intuition and creating, the sacred and the metaphysical, and therapy and healing. And I could read so much more. She's just so lovely. Welcome, Bridget. I'm so glad to have you here.
Lorilei, thank you so much for having me on. I'm absolutely delighted to be here.
Well,
Thank you so much.
you are a trooper. Like I said, for me, I usually go on a couple of hours sleep and I'm up all night long, so it's not a problem. But most people do go to bed at night and sleep. So thank you for being here.
I have to tell you that I've had a whole phase of not being able to sleep. And I think a lot of spiritual people either have challenges in their life that keep them awake, or they're night birds, or if they're doing a lot of spiritual work, it happens in the nighttime hours. So I'm often not asleep, and I've only just got back into getting to sleep. So it feels odd to disturb that sleep. But I'm absolutely delighted to be here. And, once we're up and talking, you might be the other side of the world, but we're talking the same language, just hearing
We
your
are,
introduction.
because
So
our lovely Gavin Lee Davies, who works at the publishing company that published your book, I've known him for years. And I say he is a dream PR agent to work with. He sends me the most beautiful people, such as yourself, and he does everything. Like, the man just knows exactly what you need. He sends me a bio picture, he sends me a bio, he sends me a copy of the book to review. He sends me, and I'll tell you, Gavin, I rarely refer to your questions, and I love that he does it, because he asks, like, some people may not know what to discuss, right? But I'm
yeah.
all about finding out about people and their story and how they got involved, what the impetus was for it. Also like to have our people in the chat join us. We've got Michelle Millions. Welcome. We've got one of our previous guests and a good friend of mine now, Dave Petrella. He says, hi, Lorilei. Hi, Bridget. And I wanted to remind people, I forgot, if you're over on Facebook, depending on what page you're on, I may not see your comments. So please come over to the YouTube channel. It's called UFO Paranormal Radio, or even if you look up UPRN, you'll find it and you'll see us on there. And I will definitely see the comments, because I found when they don't show up on Facebook. There's been some amazing conversation and questions going on, and we're not seeing them. So during this show. So I have to ask you, Bridget, like I ask everybody. So how did this all start for you? You're a spiritual teacher. You've written this incredible book, The Red Dress. Go ahead, let us know how this all started, how it sort of came to fruition.
Well, that's a kind of really huge story, isn't it? And a big
for it.
question, because
we got 2 hours.
So I'm going to actually go really way back to the beginning.
Please
and
do.
I believe a lot of spiritual people on the planet right now, and we're here for a reason, and we signed up and said, send me. And we're the kind of points of light at the moment, holding a grid of light in the world. And one of the wonderful things about launching Red Dress, my book, and being around talking to wonderful people like you, Lorilei, is that I'm meeting other like-minded people across the world, and we see this network coming. So I think we kind of chose to come here, and many of us chose challenges in life, and they're different challenges of different orders and different times of our life. But for me, it was quite challenging growing up in my childhood. I didn't really realize it was challenging at the time. It took me a long time to unravel it. There was no kind of there was no physical abuse or alcoholism or anything like that, but there was quite a lot of sort of emotional manipulation, let's say. So I had to kind of started a journey to unravel that. I think all along in the background there was this, you mentioned you do a lot of psychic mediumship and channeling, and I think many of us have that kind of sixth sense and really sharp intuition. And my grandmother was very much like that. You know, she used to tell the tea leaves and tell your fortunes. And so that kind of underlying matriarchal line was also in my family. And I was the only girl. I had 4 brothers. So there was this kind of spiritual side, and then there was this kind of wounded side of challenge. And when I got to the age of 30, I kind of faked it till I made it, kind of thing.
As we all do.
Yeah, exactly, totally. You wear the mask and you want to fit in with the rest of the world. And I was growing up then, you know, as a young woman in my 20s, growing up in London, in England, during the 80s, and just trying to be successful with everybody else, you know, working 9 to 5 and all of that. And underneath, I was hiding what was going on with me, really. And that led to sort of disastrous relationships and difficult, challenging things going on in my life. And at the age of 30, I'd finally got married and I had my daughter. And it did something to me. It changed something, because I stepped back from the corporate world, and I stepped back from that world where I was wearing a mask to be a mother. And that was something that was very true in my heart for me. And I wanted to be the best mom I could be. And I'm sure every mom thinks that and wants that. But that made me have to try and examine myself and the role models I'd had. So then at 2 years later, I had my son. So by the age of 32, going into 33, I was now not working. I was at home looking after 2 children and questioning myself and who I was and who I wanted to be. And that led me actually to go initially and have counseling, but at the same time I was always going to see people like psychic mediums and, you know, learning all kinds of more, what we'd say, paranormal things, some things that go beyond our 5 senses. And that started my spiritual journey. So it kind of was like this journey of having to look at some therapy work and counseling work to unravel a bit of the past and what was going on, and also very much into alternative things, I would say. And the very first thing I got into was actually feng shui and Reiki. I became a Reiki master around that time. So a lot of energy sensing, space clearing, looking at houses, energies. I got into Tai Chi and Qigong. I don't do those anymore, I do yoga now. But in those days, I was really going into that new world and exploring it. I'd had tasters in my life, and I was exploring it as a means of healing and finding myself and searching for more. Because I think that's what we're doing. We're searching for more meaning and purpose, and searching for connection with like-minded people, and for more than just the ordinary life of sort of go shopping, come home, cook, go to bed. So that started that journey. Then what happened is I ended up training as a therapist. And when you train as a therapist, you clear a lot of your own stuff. And then you start working with other people and you start clearing more stuff. But I wanted to get it balanced, because I've never been had that foot. It's interesting. My name is Bridget, and I feel like I do bridge different gaps and different spaces. And at that time, I was bridging the gap between being a sort of a therapist, a psychotherapist, but then I was bringing in healing and hypnotherapy. And then I started to bring in other kind of more spiritual things. So I had these kind of parallel journeys of the therapist and then the spiritual journey. And eventually they came together, those two journeys locked together in a kind of a balance. And I think really that was at the top of my career when I was working in Harley Street. I would start weaving all these kind of energetic healing types and psychic-y things and intuitive hits and things into my work. So it became less and less of being a therapist and more of being a spiritual healer, I guess, although still working with the psyche. So that's that bit. And then the book bit, the book, how did I get to Red Dress and how did I get to Cape Town, was that I went through a very acrimonious divorce in 2009. And I wound up looking after my two teenage children. In fact, they were taken away from me for a while, and then they came back, and they were about 15 and 17, and I was looking after them. And I was basically a single parent looking after two teenage kids because my ex just abandoned us, really, more or less. Didn't support us financially, didn't support us in any way, really, but carried on sniping from the sidelines. And I had to really work hard as a therapist to cover all the costs and things of that ilk. At the same time, my spiritual journey was getting higher and higher and higher as I got into the Book of Knowledge, the Keys of Enoch. I was doing all kinds of work. And I had a lot of synchronicities would happen. And I think we're all guided people on this journey. We have our guides or our angels, or we have symbols and things that are showing us the way. And it just felt like every single step of the way I was being guided, and I was being shown symbols and numbers and all sorts of things, which come out a little bit in my novel Red Dress. So I was guided eventually to go and actually, but it was a friend who was very psychic, told me to go to this thing on a Wednesday night. I didn't want to go. It was my only evening off. And she said, no, you've got to go. It's to do with Yes Group, to do with that Tony Robbins. I thought, it's not my thing. I don't want to go. And she goes, no, you've got to go. And only because it was her did I go. And as I went there, and I ended up by going there, meeting someone who was running a training course in tapping into your intuition. And so I knew I had to go. So I was intuitive anyway, but I wanted to know how to tap into it at will. So that was a 9-month training course. And over the course of that 9 months, what intuitively came up is you're going to basically leave Harley Street, pack your bags, your kids are going to go to university, and you're going to go to South Africa. And it was like, what? I'd never been to South Africa in my life. I didn't know anybody here.
Right.
But just before I came, I met a couple of people. South African, well, one South African who lived here happened to be in England, and another lady who was English but was married to a South African. And then one of the guys that did that training course with me was from Cape Town, and he came back to see his parents. He's now gone back to England. So I arrived magically by intuition in Cape Town in 2012. And set about sort of not really sure whether I was just going to have an extended holiday and get over burnout and the stress of this terrible breakup of this marriage, or whether I was going to stay here. But intuitively, I kind of knew I was going to stay here. About a year after that, I met Paul, who's my husband now, my South African husband. We didn't get married until 2016. And I live by how I work. So I started to kind of coach intuitively people. And so I kind of walk my talk, and I live by intuition. And so intuitively I was getting, you've got to write a book. And that was terrifying. And at first I thought it was just going to be a non-fiction, but it kept, my guidance kept going, no, you're going to write a fiction. So it was pretty scary, but I just had to do it. And I had lots of signs along the way. Like the time I knew I had to write a book. Then I had a Skype call with a friend of mine in Australia, and he said, and he's Australian, you're going to write a book, and it's like, what? And that evening, I'd been invited to a party across the road. I didn't know anybody, I was a total stranger. I'd been invited by a neighbour because I knew I'd just moved. Would you like to come over for a braai, which is a kind of a barbecue? And I arrived with my bottle of wine to all these people, and I found out that the wife, whose birthday it was that we were celebrating, was an author, and nearly everybody there was either a publisher or an author or a creative writer of some kind. And it was just so sweet. You know how the universe just goes, yep, you're right.
I
So
have a story for
that's
you
how that
very
happened.
quickly that happened this evening. Um, okay, so it's very hard to get a family doctor here. They're in Canada, especially in Ontario, where I'm living. My city of 100,000 people, 75,000 people don't have a general practitioner. So there's a
Oh,
doctor I have to see once a month. And they messed up my prescription last month. So I'm calling the pharmacy, not a word of a lie. This is like 2 hours before the show. And I'm asking them if they could fax the prescription, just fax it so he can sign it. And I said, I'm going to call them to explain why it's coming through. As I'm on the phone, a private number keeps calling me. And I'm going, who is calling me? Like, I can't hear this phone call. And I'm clicking decline, decline. So I try to call through to the doctors. I have to call 20 times in a row to get through. The receptionist picks up and says, Lorilei, your ears must be ringing. The doctor's been calling you, trying to get a hold of you. And this has been happening more and more and more and more. So I agree with you 100%. Sorry for the long story because I want you to continue with what you're saying. But just to say yes, everything you've said, yes, I agree 100%. And there is evidential proof.
absolutely. And
Mm-hmm.
I think if we surrender to that guidance and listen to
Mm-hmm.
that voice, all kinds
Yep.
of things can crop up. Yeah, even recently, the other day, I've had a few health issues, which I'm kind of getting to the bottom of now. And it's nothing serious, but it's kind of burnt me out a little bit, which is why I'm kind of trying to sleep right now. But
Right.
I've seen a lot of different people, a lot of healers, a lot of doctors, functional medicine doctors, integrate, all the Chinese medicine, you name it. And I got guided. I actually put a prayer up because I was going, okay, I know I have work to do in the world. I know I need to get the book out. I need to get my training out. I need to be out there in the world. It's
Mm-hmm.
time, it's time for the messages that I have, really, and we all have, to go out there now. People need to wake up. We're in that gateway moment. And I'm going, okay, you want me to do this work, and I want to do the work, but I've got to be physically well to do the work. It's just got to
Absolutely.
be.
Mm-hmm.
And that was sort of like on the Thursday night. And the weekend I've been in, this is a couple of months ago, was invited to a friend's house for lunch. And I met this girl who was a friend of a friend, and I kind of knew her vaguely. Turns out that she does biofeedback machine, and she says, hey, I can help you. I go and see her. She does help me. And then we get to the bottom. She goes, actually, you need to go see an integrated medicine doctor. I go, well, I've seen a couple and I haven't really sorted things out. She goes, no, I know this is the lady for you. She's quite young, but she's really good. I kind of intuitively know, when you get the goosebumps and you just know. And it's like spirit tapping you on the shoulder and going, they kind of
Pay attention to that.
Pay attention to that. They say, there's the goosebumps. You've got to do this. So I said, okay, I'm going to go see her. So I booked an appointment. And even then I was kind of like, oh, is this right? I've gone through this loop before, No, I got in my car. I was running a bit late. I got in my car, switched the engine on, and the clock went 11:11. I thought, okay.
You knew.
And then I got to the place, and it was about a half an hour drive. And I got to the place, and I had to go into one of those underground car parking garages. And it was very, very tight. Like the bays were very, very tight. You could tell because they wrapped the concrete pillars in plastic because obviously people were bumping into them. And I had quite a biggish car, and I was thinking, oh, can I get in here? And I just looked at them all, and all of the bays were very, very tight. And I just thought, I'm just going to go for this one. I'll be fine. And I had like this much to spare. I'm going in and I'm concentrating, and I finally parked the car and turned the engine off. I look up and it's bay 33. So I go, okay, this is good. It's all fine. Yeah. And I think if you're open to these things, we're guided constantly. And you can see when you're in flow, it all just is like dominoes collapsing. You start one, they set in motion, and off they go. So yeah, I'm with you on this.
Well, they do. I want to give a shout out to Zachman. He's one of our subscribers. He supported my show for a long time. So welcome. Glad to have you here. But let's go with that a little bit, because I've seen many of the things that you had put about, and I don't usually look at the questions, but I will go over them that Gavin sends me. Many of the words, almost word for word, that you have said in topics we could discuss is part of what I teach, what I talk about, and so on and so forth. And I'm hearing it from other people, and it's always the same words. So you know where it's coming from exactly. But let's build on that a little bit, because you talked a lot, I know, some of the topics about vibration. And I know when I started this journey many years ago, living in an extremely, extremely, extremely haunted house, believe it or not, That's what got me kind of on my spiritual journey. That and going for my first tattoo. I always say what do tattoos and angel cards have to do with each other. It's a long story. Some people have heard it here. But my point is we are finding that there are a lot of people that are newly awakened spiritually, but they keep hearing, raise your vibration. That's one thing. But the other thing that I could not agree with you more, and is part of my message too, is we are here for a reason. Every single one of us. Nobody is here by mistake. Now, with the vibration, if you will, or energy collectively around the world, what could we share with people? We've had a lot of suicide with young people, not realizing what a gift it is. How many souls would, like you said, pick me, pick me, pick me. Like, it's such a gift to be here. What's your thoughts on that, that we can sort of motivate people and understand? Because many of the things you talked about, balance, raising your vibration, service to others rather than service to self, I think those are part of the answer. Plus, as well, inner healing. So what can we give people?
Yeah, I totally agree with you. And I think the problem is the disconnect when somebody's really in a bad space and they're feeling really low and suicidal or depressed. So when somebody's sort of, let's say, down there, and we're talking about vibration and service and, send me, and isn't life a gift? And actually the disconnect is so huge, it's really difficult for people to get their heads around that until they are up there. So it's a journey. And so for me, it's like kind of imagine a big apartment block or a big building, big block, office block, one of those tall towers, and if you're feeling really depressed or suicidal, it's likely you're in the basement of that block. And if you're feeling great and you're in service to others, it's likely you're at the top of that block. Now, that's not a personal judgment in any way, because the person at the top could be the person who was at the bottom yesterday. It's just a structural thing. And that structural thing is like that's something most people have to take the staircase, by the way. We have to go step by step.
Yeah, it's not a quick fix, is it?
No, but every so often somebody does have a quick fix. Every so often somebody has a sudden awakening or something that's a turning point in their life, that they get the elevator right the way to the top. Often those people get the elevator to the top, see the top, and then they plummet back down and they have to make their way back up the stairs. So that's the first thing, is to realize it's a journey. You might not get there straight overnight and be in service and in a high vibration and feel like life is great no matter what it's throwing at you. That could be quite a long journey. But the point is to understand that that's there, that pinnacle, if you like, that apex, the top of the pyramid or the top of the apartment block exists and is there, and it's there for you, and it's there for each and every person when you're feeling really, really down. And so I think that's one thing I could offer. The second I could offer is that, for me, awareness is everything. Being conscious and aware of what your situation is really the first step, because if you're not aware that you're really depressed and you're feeling like suicidal because things just feel like there's no hope, for example, a lot of times that's not just you. A lot of times that's your conditioning and your past, the things that have happened to you maybe. And it could also be that if you're empathetic, which a lot of spiritual people are, they're empaths, they tune into other people's energies. There's a lot of stuff going on in the world right now, and there's a lot of fear and there's a lot of depression. And maybe you're just tuning into that. Like, when you tune into a radio station and in the old-fashioned radio, and you tune the dial and it's going to have white noise, and then you get to the station you want, and maybe you're stuck in the white noise of everybody else's stuff. So just acknowledging I feel like this can be really huge. A lot of people try to deny it, try to pretend it's okay, or try to wallow in, I'm feeling awful, I'm feeling awful, I'm feeling awful. And then they're just telling themselves that story and that message, and they're caught in a feedback loop. But the minute you can say, okay, I acknowledge this is how I'm feeling, this is what's going on for me, this is what's happening for me, I don't like it, I'm uncomfortable with it. That's the next step, become aware. And then coupled with that, which I talk about a lot, is the power of choice. When you choose things or intend things, or both, choose and intend, when you choose things, magic starts happening and the universe starts opening up. So if you choose to rise above it and have the courage and just go, look, for example, let's talk about people who possibly got depression. If you start to say, okay, first of all, I acknowledge I'm depressed. I'm in a bad place. Things are not good for me. It's really tough. It's really challenging. Challenging things have happened. Then you say, okay, but I'm going to choose to find the pathway out, or I'm going to choose to get to the top of that pyramid. I'm going to choose to find myself. I'm going to choose to find my joy. I'm going to choose this pathway. I want to feel better about myself. And we get to service after we've looked after ourselves, because it feels selfish to most people, especially spiritual people, because I think we've all signed up to be of service and to help everybody. So we want to help everybody else. And so we feel it's selfish to do something for ourselves. But actually, we've got to heal ourselves first and love ourselves first, and do it for yourself. I think most people start their spiritual journey for themselves. Either they're curious about something that's happened, like a alien encounter or UFO sighting, or maybe it's a healing crisis, or something's happened in their life, or they've had a massive health challenge, or emotional abuse or physical abuse, or something will trigger the journey. But it's that choosing and that going for it, deciding. But at first you do it for yourself, and then once that's healed, that journey unfolds like a flower until you come to a place of I'm in service, and you see the silver lining, and you see everything that awfulness has taught you about yourself and who you really are. Because for me, the way that I work when I teach in the Bone Circle is that we've all got sort of two aspects of self. We've got the greatest, what I would call the greater self, or your greatness, which is your divine self. It's your luminous being. It's creative, and it's
kind of who you really are, isn't it?
That's who you really are, exactly. And most people go, "Oh, I know there's a saying, that we're spiritual people having a human experience." But I say we are our greatness, and we are our greater self, and we have a smaller self. And the smaller self is the conditioned, programmed self that grew up with all the knocks and bangs and challenges, that now feels depressed. But actually, there's another part of you. And Eckhart Tolle talks about that a lot, doesn't he? When he says, I am depressed, and then he questions, well, who am the I looking at the me that's depressed? There's two of me. So there's always that observing witness self, the greater, luminous, glorious self that's got our back, actually, that's trying to get us out of the basement and up the stairs. And if we can start to tune into that and listen to that, then we can raise vibration. There's other ways of raising vibration as well. Obviously, if you start to follow some kind of spiritual path, you'll raise your vibration. Music can raise your vibration. You can work with the angels. You said you do angel cards. That's a fabulous way to raise your vibration. Even if you have those little tiny ones that have got a word on, you take one every day and it says courage or something, and you go, okay. Or looking at signs from the universe, like I was talking about the numbers in my car, or a lot of mantras, for example. If you sing mantras, they've got really high vibration, and particularly if you start working with, say, Sanskrit mantras or something like that, like Om Mani Padme Hum, they've got very high vibration.
I love that. It's funny you brought that up. That's one of my favorite things. I forget who sings it. It's one of the most beautiful songs. It's Om Mani Padme Hum, and I want to say it's Jane Winter.
It's not,
no, I think it's Jane Winter or something like that. I'll have to look on one of my phones. I haven't thought about it in a long time. And you're right. There's many different ways for this. I always say that, especially, you're right, a lot of people in the spiritual field, we're very good at giving, but we're not good at receiving. And I think it's all about balance on this earth, right? We live in you've got cold, you've got hot, you've got love, you've got hate, you've got light, you've got dark. But it's all about, I really believe, balance, right? When you start getting into the chakra systems and things like that, I believe human beings are meant to run energy, if you will. We're meant to, we are energy when you get even into the science, right? So I always say you can't pour from an empty cup. So I remember when I used to be on an airplane, once in a while when I was younger, like teenager years, and you'd have the flight attendant up at front saying, the oxygen mask may drop down in the event of an emergency. Always make sure you put your oxygen mask on first before assisting, say, small children or other people who may need it. I used to think, well, why would you do that? And then I realized as I got older, I'm no good to anybody. If I don't have oxygen, how am I going to help other people? That's kind of what it's like in life, right? We got to be able to fix ourselves, if not fix, heal. Because there was a point in the points I was reading that you had sent to Gavin to share, and I couldn't agree more. And I say this often, I don't know too many people that are on a spiritual path that have grown up in the Brady Bunch. Most of us have had a very, very, very difficult, traumatic childhood. And then I think when you were talking about choice, that we have a choice, right? You can wallow in that, you can wallow in the victimhood. And when I say that, that's with no judgment. Everybody has their own journey. But we can also have a choice, and we take those experiences, heal them, and then be able to be there for others. I also love, and I didn't mean to get off track here, I really love that you're talking about the greater self and then what the smaller self. I'd love to hear more about that, because in the notes it was talking about ego, and I meet so many people that believe that the ego, you'll hear this in spiritual, you've got to banish the ego, you got to banish it is part of who we are. And one of my mentors for the Akashic Records, I love what she taught us: make friends with your ego, because it's there to keep you safe. It's there for a reason. We all have something in our life, whether it's on our body, our psyche, whatever. It's there for a reason. We were created perfectly, I believe. And I think we have to embrace it all. So I'd love to hear your thoughts more on that.
Lorilei, we're absolutely singing from the same page,
I
because
know.
everything you're saying, I go, yep.
I was reading your notes going, oh my goodness, this woman's been in my head.
I mean, even when you said about the airline, I used to use that exact same analogy in therapy when I was working as a therapist. I used to say, they'd say something, well, I can't do that, I've got to do this, and I've got to do the other for somebody else. And I go, no, you need to look after yourself. And they go, no, I can't do that. And I say, when you go on an airplane, and I tell them the same story, and they look baffled, and I say, because you know what, if you don't have any oxygen, how can you
how are you going to help other people?
You've got to get your oxygen in order to get the mask. So even that story. And when you're talking about how nobody in the Brady Bunch gets to be that spiritual, because
I don't know anybody personally.
Wonderful. Their life, or the Waltons or anything like that, their life is swimming along beautifully. So there's no need to wake up. There's no need to go for a spiritual life, because they've got everything they need in the material world.
And there's no impetus for change. I always say it kind of sounds really morbid, but human beings have no impetus for change unless they go through something very painful or very difficult in life. It's true. And then you have a choice, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I love it, because we recently, I think it was a couple of days ago, the Buddhist monk from Vietnam, Thich Nhat Hanh, his name is Thich Nhat Hanh. We look at. I only know how to pronounce it because my son lives in Vietnam and he's married to a Vietnamese girl.
I was wondering. I was really impressed.
And they lived in Hue, where he lived, where his monastery was. Anyway, Thich Nhat Hanh, is like Thich Nhat Hanh, I think is actually how you pronounce it. I remember that. But he said, no mud, no lotus. So you only get to blossom into the lotus if you started off in the mud. And I think as well that there was a Rumi, I think it's Rumi, that said the wound is where the light comes in. Ooh, so the bigger the wound, the greater the light potential to come out of that wound. And in terms of the bone circle work and the greater self and the smaller self, and the ego, which is what you actually asked me, so let's just backtrack to that. Actually, the ego almost invariably is conditioned and programmed to be the opposite of what greatness is. So I'll give you an example of myself. I've written a novel, Red Dress. I'm a spiritual teacher. I have been a psychotherapist. I'm doing these podcasts with you, and I've done others and radio shows and what have you now, talking about consciousness and wisdom and vibration and all of these things. And in my own greater self, I'm here to reveal knowledge. As a child, I was teased by my older brothers, and in my ego wound, I'm a silly little girl who doesn't know anything. So you see this kind of, you talked about opposites and balance as well, and it's that middle path is the right path. It's the sweet spot in between, swinging from one end to the other. But the ego question, I find, I'm with you on it. Well, you don't have to squash your ego. You need your ego. Your ego is like your car, if you like. It's the vehicle that gets you around. And without our ego, we're a luminous spirit. We've got to have a body to clothe that spirit. And we have to have an ego to survive in the world. And that's what it does. It keeps us safe in the world. Now, if you let it go rogue and you let it take over, that's when things start to go a bit pear-shaped. And I love that. There's this beautiful quote by Einstein. I'm kind of looking up because I can never remember it perfectly. It's something like, the intuitive mind is a sacred gift and the rational mind is a is a dutiful, a faithful servant.
Oh, I remember. I read that quote in there. Yeah.
Yeah. It's fantastic. And it says, but we've created a society that honors the servant and has forgotten the gift. In other words, we honor the ego because the rational mind is part of the ego mind. The spiritual mind and the intuitive mind is part of your greatness mind. But we've got everything out of balance. It comes back to what you said. We've got everything out of balance. So it's like giving the keys of your car to a 2-year-old and then expecting them to drive and get it right when you're sitting there all along knowing exactly how to drive. And that's how greatness and ego, or small, I actually call it, you've got your greatness and your smaller self, or your ego self, or identity self, program self, conditioned self, all the same thing, all just different words for the same thing. So you've got most people's lives, the ego's running the show. So it's the 2-year-old is driving the car. And what actually has to happen is you get into balance, because when you get into balance, you realize that your ego is your ally. Because guess what? It was my ego, my body, my fingers that typed my book, which is going out to the world. And your greatness needs your ego to work through, because if you're a painter, it's the ego self, the small stuff, the body that's painting, but it's the creative luminous self that has the inspiration. Same with the musician. You're moved, we say, by the muse when you're writing. So it's your greater self, it's your own greater divine spirit is moving you to write a piece of, to hear a piece of music in your mind, or to see a picture in your mind's eye, or to want to create something. But you can't do that without the ego. So in the end, the ego has a bunch of gifts and talents and skills that it brings to the party. So we need both, and we need to get them harmonized so that your greater self is driving the car and your ego is on the passenger seat chatting. And that's kind of the point of the bone circle training, is to get you to understand both. And it's that whole axiom, know thyself. But it's not just know thy greater self and what that's come here to do, because you're quite right. We've all got a purpose and a mission and a reason for being here. We're like all parts of a multi-dimensional jigsaw puzzle, and we're each a part. And we have to play our part, otherwise we're not going to fit into the puzzle. Because trying to be somebody else or something else, we're not going to fulfill our role in the unity of it all. So yeah, it's about understanding your greater self and what that is here to do, and what service it is, and what the purpose is of this life, what we've come to achieve and accomplish and learn and grow from. And also understand the ego self, because the ego self often tries to sabotage because it's scared.
Oh, always. Procrastination, that inner voice that speaks so horribly to us that most human beings would never speak to us that way, but our inner self does. Now, I wanted to go back up a bit. Dave had a good point here. He said the Bible also says, make sure your lamp has, oil. Absolutely right. So we do need to nourish ourselves first, if you will, fill our cups up first before we can have service to others. But that was a big awakening for me. And I'm still figuring out the law of attraction, getting better at it. And you can call it whatever you want. It's working with the universe and understanding energy principles, I believe. And that was the biggest awakening for me probably about 8 years ago, was realizing, yes, I'd love to give, love to be, it's just who I am, as most of us are in this field, especially. But I wasn't very good at receiving. And I think it's so important again. And all I keep hearing is the word balance. Like, just as well as you can give, you have to be open to receiving. And that doesn't mean sitting out there with a baker's cup saying, everybody drop in $1. But you've got a friend that calls you up, maybe knows you're a little short on cash this month, and says, hey, let's go out for lunch. And the person says, well, I'm a little short on cash this month. Well, let's go. I want to see you. It's my treat. How many people would say, myself included back then, would say, oh, no, that's okay. I really don't want you to put that money in. No, thank you. That's so kind. Why not say yes? The person didn't offer it, especially if it's a close friend or something. They offered because they wanted to. They meant it, right? So it's all about, showing the universe that you're open to receiving as well. I see you making notes too.
Because I don't want to lose sight of what you're saying.
Go ahead. I started doing that too. I don't usually do that.
I don't want to lose that, but it's important.
Go ahead.
Now, first of all, so I've made notes because I don't want to lose track, but I want to go back to Dave's
I'm
question.
doing the same thing.
So Dave, thanks for pointing out that thing. That story of the lamp, the 10 virgins and the lamps, is a fabulous story because it's a spiritual story, and we see that. Always see that as the five. There's the 10 virgins who are going into the wedding, and those who have to keep that have got their oil for their lamps, and those who haven't got any oil, they go off to get the oil and they miss the wedding. And that in my highest, I work a lot with understanding scripture really through my Keys of Enoch work, which is another thing that I do. And for me, that is those who've prepared spiritually, those who've woken up and prepared spiritually and are doing their work and are sorting out their stuff and are rising above their thing. Those are the ones that have oil in their lamp. And the wedding is the higher wedding of the bride and bridegroom, which is the man-God partnership, which is when, or woman-goddess partnership, doesn't matter. It's us going into our higher nature, ascending into our higher nature, who we really are. And to do that, we have to prepare, and spiritually, in whatever way it was. And it's not a religious thing, by the way, because it's a deeply spiritual path, and it doesn't matter whether you follow the Buddhist path or you like working with angels, or whether you're Christian or Judaic, or it doesn't really matter, or if you're following Indian scripture or Hindu scripture or Sanskrit. But it's all about this spiritual preparation of healing, as you said, healing the wounding and following the light. And that is what creates the oil in the lamp that allows you to take that higher marriage with your own divine self, if you like, to ascend up. So I really love that parable and use it a lot. So thank you, Dave, for bringing that up. And then I want to move on to what you were saying about receiving and balance as well. And I think that receiving, it's a bit like the story you told of the mask in the oxygen mask. And so just see Dave, he said, the alchemical wedding, and that's absolutely right. And thank you for that. And we can look at that as Eastern medicine and energy work as well. So just acknowledge you there, Dave. Thanks so much. So receiving, it's the same thing, isn't it? It's like you not want to give the mask to yourself first. You want to give it away. And I think it's sort of like one of the later things that comes in a spiritual journey. So you started your spiritual journey and you start healing and you start getting into whatever path you're guided to take, because we're all taking different paths according to our own soul's guidance. So our soul is our pilot taking us to the top of the pyramid. So we're on our path and we're letting go of things and we're overcoming obstacles and we're opening up and we're allowing and we're growing. And it's quite a long way on that journey before we can receive, because as you quite rightly said, most people on this path have had challenges. They didn't grow up in the Brady Bunch, so they're used to giving, and they're empathetic, and they want to be. And I think as well at soul level, they're old souls. And
yes, I say it all the time. Old souls, yes.
And they know somewhere that they're here to serve, and they're here to serve humanity. So that's inculcated even from birth, before birth, pre-birth, in the previous life, or in the life before life. And so they kind of come in with a knowing that they're here to serve. But of course, that gets a bit mangled by the ego. It thinks I've got to give everything to everybody. And that's actually not what it's about. So it takes a lot of unraveling and learning before they can get to a point of receiving, because what it comes to is loving yourself enough to say, I deserve my friend to pay my lunch for me. And one of the things I think is that we think we're being selfless if we say, oh, no, I'm okay.
Yeah.
And we think we're being greedy or mean or something, not spiritual, by receiving. But actually, if you put yourself in the other shoes, it's quite interesting, isn't it? Because if you had a bit of money and you wanted to take your friend for lunch, see, we love giving, don't we? Spiritual people love giving. You want to take your friend for lunch and you go, hey, I've just got a bit of money in and I'd love to see, I haven't seen you for ages. Let me take you to lunch. And she goes, oh, no. It feels like, oh, hang on a minute. It feels horrible when you want to give a gift and somebody can't receive it.
Yeah.
So we can turn it around and look at that and say, actually, giving is a wonderful thing, isn't it? Most people who can't receive love giving. And they love giving. So why deprive someone else of that thing of giving?
I like that. I think that's important. And I'm going to remember that, because I think most people, when you turn it around, it's pretty simple to look at that we love giving and put yourself in that person's shoes. I think a lot of people could see that. That's a great point.
Yeah, because
Thank you.
we're depriving them of the
Mm-hmm.
joy of giving otherwise, aren't we? So
Mm-hmm.
it's just an interesting thing. Yeah, and I think in the terms of teaching, one of the teachings that I do, well, the main teaching that I do is the bone circle. Then I also teach the Book of Knowledge, the Keys of Enoch, but that's kind of my own personal spiritual work. And then there's Red Dress, which kind of is a primer for the bone circle. But right at the beginning, I say to people, you're going to have to get used to receiving. And they kind of look at me and they think, oh, yeah, they dismiss me. But they absolutely have to get used to receiving, because it was like you were saying earlier, the universe starts, like the phone call from the doctor. The universe starts
That blew my
helping you.
mind. Like literally, I'm trying to call, or I'm calling a pharmacy, and this private number keeps coming up. I'm not expecting him to call me, but let's just building on that a little bit though. I when you hear that inner voice and you know that it's guidance, whether it's your guides, your angels, I don't get too hung up on what their name is or who they are, as long as I know it's said a little bit different. It's in my voice, but it's meant for my highest good, and it's meant with love. And so I'm thinking, who is calling me? And I literally get through on the phone, and they've been trying to call me. Like, there are no coincidences in life. And I think the more that we pay attention to this, the more we start to realize there are no coincidences.
Absolutely, it's all a finely tuned thing, and I talk about
Mm-hmm.
that in Red Dress. The central character Katie, she realizes that there's a bigger plan that's being played out that's not from her, and she's just in part of it. She's taking the roller coaster.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, at that point, the receiving it's so literal actually with the phone call, because all you had to do was receive that phone call, but you were trying to make the call. So it's
No, but I had this nagging feeling. Like, this happened last Wednesday, and I made a mental note. Usually Mondays are my crazy day. I don't have time to do this kind of thing. But I actually came out from running out on an errand, and I had this nagging feeling. You need to deal with that right now. You need to deal with that right this second. Put everything else aside, whatever it is. And so I did. I listened. And meanwhile, it was meant to happen, because as I call, they've been trying to call me. Like, what are the chances, right?
Yeah,
So,
absolutely. At the same time as
yes,
well, yeah.
yes, yes.
You can't make that up, can you?
Nope.
There's certain things you can't make up. So, I mean, this is it. We have to receive, because if you start creating, because the bone circle is really about both creating and manifesting and healing,
I love it.
and being fully present. So there's kind of three things to it. But once you start healing the past, becoming fully present, and choosing, intending, creating, and envisioning what you want to create in the future, the universe is going to start showing up with opportunities. You have to be aware of the opportunities and be willing to receive them. And I'll give you a little example of somebody who wasn't. So there was somebody on my training, and I told you, you've got to learn to receive. She turns out that she's being guided to become some kind of spiritual minister. And so I said, oh, that's interesting. So, and the next time I saw her, she said, oh, I got this email in my inbox that was from some, place somewhere, online training to become a minister. I said, oh, wow, that's great. Did you take it? She goes, no. I said, why not? And she said, oh, I had to stop and think about it, and I only had 5 days to. I said, no, that's the universe. You made a choice and intention to do this. The universe just gave you the email, the link, the whole damn thing. And you went, no, I've got to research. That's where the ego sabotages. And that's where if she had been in a space of being able to receive, she would have gone, wow, the universe has just given this to me. I obviously need to take it.
Well, the other thing is too, again, I'm going to share a personal story here. I love to do resin work. That's my second business I'm creating. And I decided that I was going to treat myself. There's a beautiful company, Sophie and Toffee in Singapore. They send a subscription box every month. And then what people create with the boxes, like with the molds and what have you, they give away a prize. I all of a sudden this month had this picture in my mind. I didn't even really like this mold. It was a calendar mold. And I had a flash of what it looked like, and I went, I'm going to create that and I'm going to win. And I did, and I won. And it
There
turned
you
out
go.
exactly, but
Yes.
it not coming from ego. It was like literally the universe said, you need to make this. Plus, I upcycled an old calendar, so I didn't throw it out. It went to good use, and it turned out very, very cute. Like it's with a little character called Pusheen Cat. You've probably seen the cat. He's this chubby little brown cat with little hearts and pastels. So I made this, and it was like I just knew, and I've proven that many times in my lifetime. So when I have to go back to this, when you just know and you follow it, right from the age of 14, I used to say I was such a spaz, not athletic, and I just decided I was going to play basketball. And I could see myself playing basketball. You had to do the work. And it worked. I was like on the team the next year and what have you. But this is what it's about, right? When we follow it, and even though the ego might kick in and you say, no, no, that's okay. I see that path. I see what's going to happen. And we go for it. And I mean, you've got to put the work in. You just can't sit back and say, yes, it'll happen. You do need to work towards it. I believe that's how it works. And I see you writing. So what's your stroke of genius that's come through with this? I love everything you're saying.
It's so amazing. I love this.
Mhm.
I agree with you. First of all, we were talking about, you a little bit earlier on, you were saying, about listening to that voice, and you don't have a name for it. It doesn't matter whether that's a guide or an angel or your own intuition. And but you got to know. And then you came in and said, but it's the knowing. And for me, that's what it is. It's a knowing, because it's coming from a higher space and it's almost instantaneous. It's an instantaneous communication. It's not like you have a feeling about this or a thought about that, or you've sat in your bed and thought about it. And it's not like that. It's like, bang, you've got it.
Exactly.
And so I think discernment is the most important thing here, is to be able to discern the difference between that higher message which comes instantly and with a knowing, and the kind of the I think about it and I think I ought to do this, and I feel like excited about that, or I feel I might win the resin calendar thingy if I do it. No, it's not. It's like, no, I know. So
that's what happened, and it sounds real. It sounds egotistical, but it wasn't coming from that place. I knew. I actually told my husband, my partner, Del, I said, I'm going to win this month. I know I am. And I hadn't even created it yet. And like I said, it wasn't coming from ego. It's just, you knew. I'm getting goosebumps telling you that.
That's right. Goosebumps is one of mine. I get goosebumps, my hair's on end, and it's on a truth, So you're absolutely right. And it's not an ego thing. It's like it's coming from a higher dimension of space and time, which is because that's part of you or your guidance, because I think we're all connected anyway up there.
Absolutely.
It's only in the physical that we're not connected. And even in the physical, if we look at quantum physics, we are connected because we're all just electrons.
Exactly.
So it's coming from beyond time and space. So that part of you beyond time and space knows you're going to win. And it's telling you. So it's almost like an instant download from a higher dimension.
That's what it was. Yes.
Yeah. So that's a knowing. And it's all about discerning that and knowing. And when you do know, and it's come like that, then you can trust and have faith in that as your true north, as your true guidance, as your true compass. And then the other thing I loved, there's two other things that I just so on the same page. You wait, but you have to do the work. And it's so true, because I think a lot of people get into, manifesting of different types, law of attraction and cosmic order. They think they're going to cosmic order, or they're going to have a law of attraction, or they're going to have the house they want, or the partner they want, or they're going to win the competition, or whatever it is. And then they sit back and wait for it.
And just wait for it to happen.
You can't do that, because the universe applauds action. The universe applauds action. Now, everything in the universe is changing and moving constantly. The only constant is change. Everything is moving. So we have to take action. And for me, that is the yin and the yang and the balance we talked about, because there's a balance between the stillness of hearing and receiving that message you're going to win, or you're going to move to South Africa, or you're going to write a book, or whatever it is. You have to be still to hear that above the chatter of the ego mind. But then you have to take action. So it's that yin and the yang. It's the stillness and the action, the stillness and the action. So you take inspired action, then you get another message about the next step. It's like a sat nav, isn't it? It never tells you the whole journey. It says, go down the road and turn right. And then you turn right, and then it goes, carry on for 200
But
miles.
it's about trust, right? It's about trusting, like you said, the sat nav, that when you get to that point, and it's almost like the universe gives you just as much that it knows you yourself, meaning the global you, can handle. And when you get to that point, there'll be further directions. But let's talk about that stillness, because I am a huge proponent of meditation. And I saw, like I said, I don't normally go through notes. I'm not reading them. It's just from memory of going through it, and everything I kept reading, I went, oh my, that's why I said to you before the show, you're going to have to come back on, because we have so much to talk about. So let's talk about meditation, because that's a big part of what you teach and what you talk about as well, isn't it?
Yes, it is.
Mhm.
I'm just going to go back and then I'll
No
talk
worries.
about meditation, because you
Yep.
also talked about the ego kicking in.
Mhm.
And that's another thing we have to be aware of,
Mhm.
that your ego's there to keep you safe.
Yes.
So when your greater self gets the message, either through guidance or through its own self, that you're going to win the thing, or that you're going to go to whatever it is that you've got,
Mhm.
the ego always kicks in. And the way that I teach that is, I don't know if anybody else has had this experience. Maybe you're driving your car to work, say, to a familiar journey, and you're driving along the highway, and you get to maybe the lights,
Yeah.
and a little voice in your head says, turn right or turn left or something.
Mhm.
And you ignore it because you go, no, that's not the way to work. That's the long way round. I'm going to be late. I need to go straight on.
Mhm.
You go straight on and you hit a roadblock, or
Exactly.
something, accidents happen, the lanes close, and you go, oh no, why
I
didn't I
should have
listen?
listened.
I should have listened. And so
Yeah.
whenever your own greatness, your own intuition, or your guidance, or your guides, or I also don't name it, by the way, I just say intuition.
I don't either. I'm not hung up on that, because I just know, like you just
and
know,
also
right?
different guides and different things and different energies and levels and things come through you. So it's not, it's just all really information that you're getting from a higher plane, I guess.
Mhm.
So whenever you get that,
Mhm.
that's coming from your greater self,
Mhm.
and your small self or your ego self is always going to sabotage it. It's always going to go, oh no,
Or
but I
had
know
that
better.
inner argument dialogue. I've had that many times. No, I'm not doing that. Like we were going to a party one year. It was a couple of years ago at one of Dell, my partner's friend's house, and they know what I do. They're not crazy about what I do, but we just don't talk about it. As I'm going out the door, I hear, grab your deck that does, it was a mediumship deck. And I'm arguing with that voice in my head, going, I am not bringing that deck with me. They're going to think I'm a nut. Grab the deck. You're going to need it. I'm not bringing it. Grab the deck. Fine, I'll grab the deck. As I get goosebumps telling you this again, what happens? Talking to a girl I've never met before. Her mom had died 6 months earlier.
Sure.
And we ended up doing the most beautiful reading. And then afterwards, she just told me in the reading that her mom's favorite color was pink. And there's a picture of us by the fire, because it was called the Christmas tree burning party once the snow melts. I guess people bring the real Christmas trees. It's out in the country and they throw it on the fire. There's a picture of her, and there's a ball of pink light right where her heart chakra is.
Beautiful.
But there,
Beautiful.
inner guidance. That's what I'm talking about, that argument that I was having.
Yeah.
And sometimes I will, and then I realize, if it's that insistent, I need to listen.
That's right. That's right. But I think when you're at the beginning of your journey, you don't listen. It takes time and experience to listen. So that was one thing I just wanted to go back. And then let's come back to your other question about meditation, because for me, I started to learn to meditate in the year 2000. I just remember it was the year 2000. So now we're in 2022. I've been meditating 22 years. And it started off for me. My kids would have been 10 and 8 at the time. They were at school. I worked part-time as a therapist, and I had my day off. And on my day off, I'd listen to the radio. And on the radio, this was in England, in London, there was an American woman who'd come over, and she was a life coach. Now, we're talking 20 odd years ago, 22 years ago, life coaches had just started to happen, and people didn't really know what they were. We thought a coach was somebody that taught you how to play basketball. So so there was this woman, and I got fascinated. I was just listening, and I was kind of like cleaning the house and cooking and, doing domestic rubbish, listening to the radio. And she was talking, and right at the end, and I was kind of taking note of what she was saying. And then right at the end, I think the interviewer sort of asked her, well, what can you give a tip for the listeners, and what's the most important thing? She just went, meditation. And it took me aback, because she was quite businessy. And then she suddenly went, no, meditation, because you can, and I can't even remember what she said. Something about, if you carry on meditating, you'll be so much more efficient at everything you do. So I just thought, I've got to look into this. So I immediately like talk about the universe answers you. I was going to Mind Body Spirit Fair in London the following week. I got to the Mind Body Spirit Fair. There was a huge, great bookshop right at the entrance. I was browsing through the angel cards, and there's this book, Moon Over Water, which is a book about meditation. I bought that book, read it, and basically taught myself to meditate. After that, I went on various meditation courses, including the 10-day silent retreat with Passion, which I've done. But I kind of just taught myself to meditate. And then actually within about 2 years of that, I taught a meditation class.
Wow.
And I used to teach meditation and deep relaxation. And I still meditate today. And through all of my journey and all the many, many things I have, there's loads of things I've done, because it's a 30-year journey. You know, I'm getting a bit long in the tooth here, Lorilei. So
am I.
So there's been lots of things I've done. And through all these things, I remember a long time ago, a lady, I did a Merkaba course, and the lady went, "Oh, this is the most powerful thing." And I just went, no, I think if my most powerful thing is meditation. And now, from the standpoint of where I'm at now, I absolutely love and adore the Book of Knowledge, the Keys of Enoch, and looking at spiritual scripture. And I find that fascinating, but still, I still think all of that's great, but it's no good unless you assimilate it. And you're only really going to understand it and embody it and assimilate it if you can find a way of being still. So for me, it's stillness. For me, I do meditate, actually. It's meditation. I know some people find it tough to meditate. I did talk to one lady, and I said, well, nobody finds it easy to meditate. Hey, it's like, you know, you can't pick up a violin and play it, or go to the gym and just run on the treadmill straight away. You have to build up, or you know, lift weights. Whatever it is you're doing, you have to practice it. And it's the same with meditation. It's not easy, it's hard, but we practice it, and you just sit. And if you can only sit for 5 minutes, you do that, and then you build up. But I know there are some people who are very, very kind of hyperactive and find it difficult to sit still. Well, then do Tai Chi or Qigong or something like that, or walking meditation. But even if all you can do is sit in your garden, say, or sit in a park or in nature on a rock and listen to the birds and listen to the wind in the trees and just breathe in the fresh air and sit and do nothing and not really think about anything too much apart from the things that are around you, and just be in a sort of happy place and a smile, even that is a stillness point. And without that stillness, we can't become fully present. And without that stillness, I don't think we can grow, because I think that's how we grow inside. That's how we find the divine inside of us, the light inside of us. And that's how we connect more and more deeply to spirit and to guidance. It's through the stillness.
Well, there's so many different ways to meditate. My really good friend, Augie Nost, he's from Norway, he lives in Arizona now. He gave a really good tip to people. This was, God, it was one of his, we were on another network together, so this was quite a few years ago. But he had suggested for people that find it hard to meditate. I've tried it myself just to see what I thought of it. But he says when you close your eyes, he said, you almost cross your eyes, but you don't, like, it wouldn't be painful. It's almost like the way I liken it to, I've never been able to get these pictures to work, but the ones that look like a bunch of squiggly lines, but apparently if you don't focus, but you kind of focus, a picture becomes
something.
Yeah, so that's what he suggested. He said it sort of helps bring the midline of the brain together, so there's not that disconnect, and it helps the mind chatter, he said. And I had quite a few people say they found that helpful. But I say to people, even if you can't get that stillness right away, try a guided meditation, or try, there's so many different kinds. I mean, there's breathing, there's certain types of breathing you can do. There is binaural beats, there's, different megahertz that you can. And I find too, especially when I've got a lot going on, or I need an answer to a question, or I've been around a lot of people, because I love people, but you don't realize how draining groups and groups of people can be. As you probably know yourself, I'll be craving that stillness and that quiet. And the same thing I tell people too, I find sometimes different crystals help with meditation. I mean, I have done this myself. You can go into meditation, connect with your guides, and you want them to teach you about something, they will teach you. Whether you get it in a download or whatever it is, they will teach you. So I don't know, like, what's your experience? Have you had any of those yourself, or anything to add to that?
Yeah, no, again, I agree with you that I'm used to be very, very sociable and live in London with loads and loads of people.
Mhm.
And now living in Cape Town, I've almost become a recluse, you know, and
Mhm.
it's like, I do love people. I do love talking to
Yeah,
people. I talk a lot to people online.
me too.
But if
Yeah.
I have to go into the mall and go shopping, I can't stand it because I'm not very good with all the electronics anyway. And so I go in
Love
there and get out as
electronics.
quick as get out as quick as I can. And then I need that space. And I find if I've been around a lot of people, I love it and I have a great time,
Yeah.
but I need to take space and
Yeah, the
quiet.
quiet.
And even if it's just the house is empty, my husband's gone out somewhere and I can just potter about in my house on my own. I think this is why talking about guided meditations, that's why I did when I taught meditation, I used to teach meditation and deep relaxation, because there's lots of ways of doing deep relaxation. I used to teach a bit of yoga as well, and you can do things like
Love it.
yoga nidra where you relax the body, and or you can do, you know, like you're going down a path and you go through a gate,
Yes,
and
I've done that
and
for
I do a
people.
lot of those in the Bone Circle. I do those guided meditations, but usually for a purpose rather than
Mhm.
for just stillness, but you can do it for stillness. And so I think just sometimes it's the space you're in and the quietness you're in. Sometimes it can be a guided meditation. Sometimes it can be crystals, like you said, and sometimes it can be music. You know, sometimes you put a beautiful piece
Yeah.
of music on, you can just sit and listen to that music and be fully present with it. Because the point of the stillness is that you can go inside and be fully present. And I think as well, you can, in terms of learning things, I've also done that because sometimes
Yeah.
I've done things like I've been woken up in the night and I can't get back to sleep and I can't get back to sleep. I've tried everything. I've done my deep breathing. And yeah, breathing
Mhm.
is another one, a whole pranayama thing.
Yes.
And they've got the Wim Hof and all sorts of breathing exercises that bring you into stillness. And in fact, a lot of
Mhm.
people like the Wim Hof, it brings them into a meditative state. So anyway, I was doing all these things and I still wasn't going back to sleep. And it was like you were going, then the voice and then the other voice. You know, it was like, you need to get up and
So
meditate. Oh,
people
but
know
it's
we're
cold
not
and it's the middle of the
hearing
night.
voices. It's in your
So
own voice.
it's your own voice. But I get you need to get up and
Yeah.
meditate. No, I'm too comfortable in bed. You need to get up and meditate. No, it'll be cold outside. You need to get up and meditate. It's 4 a.m. And eventually I'll get up. If it's one of those. Okay. So I get up and I go into another room and I sit on I have a meditation stool and a meditation cushion as well. And I'll sit down and I'll meditate, close my eyes. I'll go into a meditative space and immediately the download comes, the information comes, something comes, some kind
Wow.
of message
Mhm.
comes. So I do get that. And the other one I do sometimes if I've got a problem to solve
Yes.
and I don't know, I'll either put it up like that or I'll put it out to the universe. But the other one I do is just sleep. So before I go to bed, I go, okay, I'll have been thinking about something. And I'll go, okay, I really need the answer to this. So I'm going to put it up to the universe. And then I know that in the morning I'll have the answer. And invariably, jump out of bed and I've got a pen and paper and I have to write it all down because it's there.
Yes.
And the other one for me is walking, particularly when I'm writing. When I was writing Red Dress, you know, get to tricky scenes and you wouldn't be sure. You'd finish a scene and you wouldn't be sure what bit to go on to next or what was going to happen or how this was, didn't know how to link this bit to the next
Yeah.
bit, you know. So I'd give up and I'd go for a walk. And I live near the ocean, so I would walk
Oh.
down the back and I'd go and I'd be in the fresh sea and I could hear the waves and wind, mountains and sea. And I'd be walking, and all these ideas would come because I'd stopped thinking. And all I was doing was walking and being with nature. And I'd have my phone and I'd have to do these voice notes all the way along.
Yeah.
And I'd put my phone away and I'd be walking a bit longer. And I'd go, oh, I've got another idea. And I'd have, I know what I'm going to do. I'm going to make this person do this. I'm going to make this person do that. Or I need to talk about this. And I'd have whole sentences that ended up in the book. So that's another way of doing it, is to walk in nature on your own. So you're not talking to
The
other
other
people.
one I love to do, okay, I'm a chronic pain sufferer. Not that it makes no
Oh,
difference to share that, but the reason I do is because that's why I don't sleep, because I can't lay down too long. But when I get most of my meditation done, and I love to create, I could walk into a hardware store, look around, and every piece, it's like a jigsaw puzzle. I know where it goes, the picture comes together. So that's where I do most of my meditation while I'm creating. It's almost like it's on autopilot because, like I said, the picture's already there. So it's
mm,
just my hands are doing, but that's where I find a lot of the quietness. Unless, like you said, there's a problem or I really do need to de-stress. It's almost like once you get used to it, you crave it. Like it's like, oh my gosh, like what is missing? I need to have some stillness and some quiet, right?
yeah. I think another one that I absolutely agree with you. And I think it's been the single most important part of my spiritual journey, because without the stillness and the meditation, I wouldn't have got guided into the things that I've done, you know,
Mhm.
and the path that I've taken.
Yeah.
Um, I think there's a thing about flow here. When you're in stillness, then you can go into flow. Then you've got the taking action of the inspired action. And another way I think people can touch base with that stillness sometimes is actually when they're doing something they love. And that's their kind of happy
I love
place.
doing it,
So
yes.
if somebody loves gardening, or they love cooking, or they love painting, or they love swimming, or whatever it is, if it's something they really, really love doing, often they'll lose track of themselves.
That's what happens. And it's like, where did the 8 hours go?
Yeah, you lose yourself to find yourself. So you lose yourself in whatever it is that you're doing, baking a cake or going for a run or windsurfing or something. You lose yourself in that thing, and then you find your own greater self. I noticed Dave's asking.
That's why I put it up there. Dave asked a good question. So he said, what are the principles about bones, Bridget, and the keys of Enoch that you teach? He wants to know all about that. And yes, that's a great question, because I was wondering all that too, Dave. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Dave. Actually, I'm going to take that as two completely separate questions, because two completely separate things. So I'm actually going to take the keys of Enoch first, then go back to the bones. So the keys of Enoch is a book, a teaching, I would say, rather than a book. It's called The Book of Knowledge, The Keys of Enoch. I've actually got it here with me, so I'll kind of just quickly show you. This is my tattered old copy with things all the way, you can see. And it was brought through, well, not brought through because it's not a channeled information. Dr. J.J. Hurtak, who wrote it, had a paraphysical experience where he was taken off planet and shown a whole load of stuff. And it's really it's the keys to future science. And it's a whole teaching, which I've been involved in for about 15 years. It's been out since 1973, so it's been out for almost 50 years now, 49 years or whatever. So it's something that I think people get drawn to. It's quite a complex book. It's quite difficult to understand. You have to go to a study group to really get your head around it. So I got led to that book, and it showed up in my life several times. I thought, okay, I need to go and investigate this. I bought the book. I got fascinated by it immediately. I got goosebumps. I went along to a study group in London, and there are study groups all over the world, by the way. There are in Canada, in the US, Europe, Australia, South Africa. So there are study groups, and you really need to go to a study group to kind of get your head around it.
I think Dr. Hurtak has been on our network. I'm positive the owner of our network. I should give him a shout out. I usually do Joe Montaldo. He used to produce us. Now I produce my own show through his network, and he's got many great shows himself. I'm positive because him and his wife
Desiree.
They have been on our network lots. On Joe's show.
They are on a lot of things, and they're on the spiritual circuit, and they are really amazing teachers and speakers. So it's Desiree Hurtak, Dr. J.J. Hurtak, Keys of Enoch, and so I went into that teaching, and then just before I moved to South Africa, I kind of was starting to be groomed, if you like, to teach. And to facilitate a study group. And then when I came to South Africa, I was asked to facilitate a study group, and I still now facilitate a study group in Africa, in South Africa, of that teaching. So that's one thing. And the principles of it, as I said, it's actually, there are 64 keys of different levels of science, of what we call future science. And also it's what's called a capstone teaching. So it encompasses all of the different traditions. So in there, for example, we have Egyptian teachings. In there we have some Kabbalah. Some talks about a lot about the Hebrew. It talks about the 5 sacred languages of Hebrew, Tibetan, Chinese, Egyptian, and Sanskrit. It's got the Bon Tibetan tradition in there. We also talk about the cosmic Christ in there. So it's not it's coming down from a higher teaching that is the capstone upon the top of everything we've got here. And it's a preparation really for what's coming. So I don't want to go too far deeply into that, because it's such a esoteric, complex teaching. And if you're drawn to it, I suggest go and have a look at Keys of Enoch website, and there's a Keys of Enoch YouTube channel. And as Lorilei said, there's lots of, they are on the circuit, and there's lots of information out there about the Keys of Enoch and the Doctor's Hurtak, and it's fascinating. So then let's look at the bones. So the bones is the bone circle, and that's my own teaching, then that's really my work that I teach. At the moment, I'm in the middle of moving it online, because it was a physical teaching. People would come and I would teach them in person. But because of, well, two reasons. Number one, the lockdown. And number two, I want this teaching to go out to the world. And it's no good. I'm living in South Africa. So if you're in Canada and you want to do the bone circle, you can't do it physically. So I'm in the process of putting it online, which means I need to develop a website and I need to change it. And I'm also simplifying it, because it got too complicated. And I want it to be accessible to people. So, and I kind of started off by saying I had a few health challenges recently. And so I'm kind of just pacing myself, but it's coming soon this year. I've already got the website starting to get that up and running, and I know what I want to do with it. So the bone circle is an entire teaching, and it's a completely transformative way of life. And what it does is it draws on the three different areas of my life. One is looking at healing the past, which is my life as a therapist and healer, because we do have to heal some things, not everything, but we do have to heal the traumas and heal the past. So that's looking at the past and healing the past and letting go of the past and not letting the past influence us and pull us back. And then the second area is to look at the spiritual work of and lifestyle choices, which enables us to be fully present, which is things like stillness and meditation, and going for a walk in nature and drinking water, and bits of yoga and breath work and
grounding.
Grounding is another one. Absolutely brilliant. Actually, I need to put a note. Grounding. We need to put that in.
And gritting. Actually, on my videos on YouTube, and I need to put some teaching videos up there. Those two videos, I have one called How to Create a Love Shield, because I hate to come from a place of fear. But like you said, when you're empathic, and you're picking up other things, one of the things I teach people is, if you're feeling it and you don't know why it's there, but you think it might be yours, but you're not sure, to ask your body, get quiet and ask, is this mine? Your body will always tell you either yes or no. And if it isn't, I teach people just return to sender. Put love with it, especially. Never can go wrong. Nothing negative attached with it in any way, shape, or form. But the other thing with the love shield, and I hate when somebody gives me myself instruction and it's a long process, and then after you've watched a video or read it, you go back and go, what was step 3 again? What did they say? So I like to walk people through the video to craft it for something that works with them. And I've taught both my kids this. My youngest has severe autism and he's 24. He calls it the bubble. He still calls it, Mommy, I put the bubble up tonight. And my eldest, because we lived in a very haunted house before we moved here 2 years ago, and it was very dangerous. And my eldest shared with me, he used angel wings. So what I do is I walk people through how to create this shield, not from a place of fear, but a place of love. And you can design it any way you want. So when we are going into, say, a group of people, and maybe there's some people have toxic energy around them, whatever it may be, but you're shielded. And so that, in the grounding and gritting video, I must have shared that over 100 times with different people. Because a lot of people, it's always so strange to me that we've never grown up learning these things about energy, including grounding, how important that is. Now, there's a new video out there called Earthing that came out a couple of years ago. I mean, that principle is thousands of years old, and they made it sound like it was this revolutionary new thing, right?
Totally. It's so brilliant. That's fantastic work, and absolutely right. Things like grounding and shielding and boundaries as well, and all kinds of lifestyle stuff. So that's the kind of spiritual part that comes in. And I work a lot. We talked about vibration. I work a lot with sacred names and to bring in vibrations. And I work a lot. There's lots of different names I work with, and singing and chanting. And I get people to dance and be in their body and express their body. So that's the spiritual side. And then the third part of the bone circle is tapping into intuition at will.
Love it.
And so that you can envision what you came here to create. And that doesn't have to be like, it could just be like, I don't know, a happy relationship, or being a great mom, or I don't know, it could be anything.
Learning how to have fun. I think that's my partner's mission in life, how to have fun.
My partner's very laid back. He's brilliant. And he's totally intuitive and on it, but there's no big picture thing. He's kind of just really chilled. So you're asking about bones, and I'll get to it, Dave. So then that's the third part, is tapping into your intuition. In fact, there's 5 levels of bone circle, and on the 4th level you get a thing called your gift of life. So you receive the gift of life from the higher realms, which is a gift that's given to you that then you create and realize and make real, and then you're gifting it to the world. So there's a beautiful teaching. The reason it's called bones is that so the whole thing, the crux of it is intuition and the spiritual mind. So when I created the training, I needed to call it something, and I didn't know what to call it. So I tuned in with my intuition, and I did it with partnership. And this is why it's a circle, because you work with other people, and there's a lot of practical experiences. Like Lorilei was saying, she walks people through that meditation so they can do it and make it simple. So there's lots and lots of practical exercises. So you have to work with others. And we talked about how the ego sabotages. So you need other people. If you think of any like heroes, it's a hero's journey, really. If you think of any film with a hero's journey, like Harry Potter or The Matrix, obviously just the new one coming out, Neo doesn't do it alone. He's got Morpheus, he's got Trinity. We need people to take that journey with us, to cheer us on and go, yes, you can do it. No, it's true. Go for it. So that's why it's the circle. So I tuned in with somebody else to find out what is this thing going to be called, and what came out of that tuning in, tapping into intuition, was the bone circle. And I had goosebumps, and I knew, we go back to knowing, I knew it was true to call it the bone circle. And go back to ego and sabotage. My ego was going, you can't call it the bone circle, it's got to be something like alchemical transformation, or no, it's going to be called the bone circle. And actually after that I got all kinds of confirmations. I was rereading at the time Women Who Run with the Wolves by Clarissa Pinkola Estes, and she talks about the bones in there, and about finding the bones and going deep into the bones. And so it was a confirmation. But for me, the bones are the framework and structure of your body. And we don't see our bones, they're inside, aren't they? But they are the thing that carry us. All the rest of us, we're just a floppy piece of meat without the bones. The bones are the hardest thing, and they don't go. When you bury someone, you can still see the bones years and years later, and identified the DNA of that. The bones are hidden, but they are linked as well. So they're linked together in a structure.
And they're designed to take weight. They actually don't function well without that weight.
That's right.
Using them and pressure. And
so there's lots of things about bones that work for the bone circle, in that we are working with structures, underlying structures, hidden structures, strong structures on which you build your life. Also, I like the fact that we feel things in our bones. You go, I felt it in my bones. So there's that. And there's also, I'm in Africa, and the shamans throw the bones to predict the future. And then the other one is that there are actually principles that I work with in the bone circle, which are the bones. So they are bones, and they are all linked together. Now, often people on a spiritual journey, they're learning things. They're learning something over here. They're learning to meditate over here. They're learning about Buddhist practice over here. They're learning about something else over there. They're learning about angels over there, and they're learning about Merkaba over there, or something. But it's all just different things. And what the bone circle, what bones do in your body, is they're all linked together. And what the bone circle does is link these bones together. So it's like threading pearls of wisdom on a string. So you learn these different bones, and the very first bone that you learn is that you're a creator, that you create. And you're either going to create unconsciously from the ego and the wound, and you're going to create havoc and things that you don't like, or you're going to become aware and you're going to create purposefully from greatness, and then you're going to start creating things that are true for you. So that's the very first bone, and we build on that, we learn it, and we grow with it, and we do practical exercises, and when you know that, we go on to the next bone. And so we link these bones together. So I hope that's answered your question.
I love it. And that's a great explanation. That, like you said, there's so many confirmations for you, and it really makes a lot of sense why that name is just perfect for the program you've created. Now, I haven't. Oh, go ahead.
Sorry.
No, go ahead.
I was going to say, I love circle. The fact it's a circle, because circles are always very powerful, because nobody's the boss in a circle. Everybody's equal in a circle.
And never ending.
It's never ending. And then that's that circle, your circle of friends, your circle of people. It's like a fellowship or a sisterhood or a brotherhood. So it's your circle that you can rely on, your inner circle. And if you think about the crown on chakra, the reason kings and queens of old wore a crown was because it was that crown chakra. And the circle of gold was the sovereignty of opening the crown and connecting to God, because they all felt that they were appointed by God. So it's the circle also, if we think about circle, it defines, if you think about the play, the Caucasian chalk circle, a circle can define things. You can circle things, and, you know, like even on a murder scene, they circle it with chalk and go, this is the murder scene. You know, that's defining space. And we use circles a lot to define things within the bone circle. So there's lots of reasons for calling it a circle. And we know a circle also represents a sphere. So we've got the music of the spheres, and we know that all the platonic solids fit within the sphere. And the sphere is everything, and we have a sphere of influence. And so there's just so many layers to why it's called the bone circle. Thanks for asking, because nobody normally asks me things like that. So it's great to be able to delve into it.
Well, it's a very unique name too, that what I love about it is it creates a question into what is that, like Dave asked. And even say somebody's a little aversive or kind of on the fence about spirituality, to hear that explanation you'd want to delve in deeper to find out, well, what's involved with this, like what is this. And so I love it, like, and it's not a name easily forgotten. Like, it's not going to get lost in the big pile of, you know, spirituality names that we hear. Like, he's first thought, you know, with the alchemy. I love that word, but there's a lot of things with alchemy in it. You don't hear the bone circle necessarily associated or even heard of in these circles, if you will, of spirituality. So I love it. Now, Dave says, excellent, great. In esoteric biology, the mission is to rebuild the bones in the body as well. Interesting.
Awesome. Thank you.
I love it.
Yeah.
So I've been dying to ask you this. I don't know, have you seen that movie out there called Infinite with Mark Wahlberg? It just came out in June.
I haven't actually seen it, and probably because I'm in Africa, so we get things late. So I've got friends of mine in England go, have you seen so-and-so? And I go,
I'm asking because, again, speaking of having experiences, that there are no coincidences. But I actually channel with two other wonderful ladies from the UK, but one is in Canada, one was in Canada, now is living in Mexico. And she watched it and said, I'd love for the two of you to watch it and see what your thoughts are. And it gets into past lives. It gets into that we are infinite beings, which you and I both know we are. The soul goes on forever. There is no such thing as death. But it gets into that the infinites are those who are aware of every past life they have ever lived in this living body while on Earth. And then the bad guys in the movie also remember every past life. Now, the good guys choose to leave Earth in a better place than it was when they were born onto it. So when they leave this lifetime, they want the Earth to be a better place. The bad guys want the Earth to end. They want the Earth to completely end, and because they don't want to keep remembering all the past lives. The reason I ask you, because it had an interesting, I won't give away too much of it, but it had an interesting premise with technology about when the soul leaves the body, about trapping the soul. Now, to me, that's a man-made concept, because to me, it just means that we don't really understand the infinite power of our Creator. I'd love to hear your thoughts about it, because I know you talked about past lives and some of your stuff, and that we go on forever. So I thought I'd ask if you saw it or what your thoughts were.
Okay, awesome. Thank you. So first of all, I'll have to look out for that film. It will eventually get to Africa, probably about 6 months.
Well, afterwards, I'll send you something.
Yeah.
Email it to you.
Awesome. So I used to do a lot of past life regressions, not specifically, I did them for people if they asked me, but also sometimes client would come in for therapy. And sometimes I'd take them into hypnosis, and sometimes they'd go into a past life. And the way I used to language it was instead of going, oh, we're going to go to past life, I'd say, okay, what can we get to the subconscious mind? I want you to go back to whatever it was that started this problem off in the first place. 1, 2, 3, clap. And where are you? And they'd sometimes be in a past life. And then sometimes people would say, can you take me into a past life? Yeah, okay, sure. So I've done that. And I've also been into many past lives myself and seen lots of past lives. And I've had past lives in South Africa, which I've had to do healings and stuff on. They're really fascinating subject. And I do believe we've had many, many lives, but I also believe we're all connected and we can tap into a consciousness of a past life that might not have been ours, but it may be teaching us something. So there's a whole kind of stuff. I think there's so much we don't know. In terms of the soul and the dark and the light, I think it's the age-old story, isn't it? The dark versus the light. And it always looks like the dark is going to win, but the light always wins in the end.
Light always wins.
And what light always wins because it's more powerful. And there's something else I wanted to talk about here, touch on a little bit. So one of the other things that's part of, so the Keys of Enoch comes under the umbrella of the Academy for Future Science. And the doctors, the good doctors Hertak, have written lots and lots of different things, not just the Keys of Enoch. And one of the things that they have annotated and is one of the Nag Hammadi texts, scrolls. They're not scrolls, actually. Yeah, they're not scrolls. And I think they're actually books rather than scrolls. So anyway, they've taken the books of the Pistis Sophia, which is the Nag Hammadi teaching of. It teaches of the Pistis Sophia, which is the personification of wisdom and faith. That's what her name means. Pistis means faith, and Sophia means wisdom. And they have taken the original books and then they have explained it and done expositions on it, and there's a big fat book called the Pistis Sophia, and I'm in the process. It's taken us a couple of years, and I have there's a group every other Monday, and myself and some other teachers in the academy in South Africa have been teaching that teaching, and there's a lot in there about this dark versus light and the trappings of the soul, and what it's basically talking about in that the whole book starts with the risen Christ. So it's after, so the Bible stops at him dying, basically, and then he goes into a body of light, and off he goes, and that's the end of the Bible. Well, the Nag Hammadi and the Pistis Sophia pick up 11 years later in his body of light.
Right,
so
up my
11
alley.
years on in a body of light, and he's teaching the disciples. And there are women disciples, Mary Magdalene being the principal one. And Salome and the other Marys. So it's not just men. That's the other thing. And he's teaching the divine feminine, because the whole of the Pistis Sophia is about the divine feminine, because wisdom is the feminine, is divine feminine. And wisdom has got negated here. It's got blocked, and so has the feminine, and it's returning now. So he's teaching his disciples, and through a discourse, through this conversation with them. And they're asking him questions and he's answering. And through that conversation, the person that's reading it is learning a greater cosmology, a vast setting out of the many infinite heavens, for example, and spaces and eons and realms and all of these things. And so they're learning this much, much higher teaching just through reading this text, which has been around for a couple of thousand years or whatever, just under that. And so they're talking about how there are spaces which are unfallen. There are spaces which are pure light. There are spaces which are, they call it the ineffable, or we would call that the Father Universe. It's like the pure realms. In Kabbalah, we would call that the Atnot or the Absolute. It would be the pure realms of source and light. And then that emanates out, just like sun rays emanate out. And as it emanates out, the further away from source, the more we're going into darkness, so to speak. But there are still realms, even if they're on the outer edges of that emanation, which are unfallen, which are based on love and wisdom and compassion and all of the wonderful gifts of gentleness, kindness, and all of these things that we all want. And I think spiritual people crave for and want. But if we look at the story of Adam and Eve, for example, we look at the story of the fall, and we look at the story of how God creates man and woman. It actually is, this is before Eve. He creates man and woman both alike. He creates them. And that's the Adam Kadmon, the higher blueprint of Adamic species, not just us, actually. And then what happens is he asks Lucifer to bow. And he says, I've made this being in my image and similitude, in my image and likeness. In other words, we're not like, God is not like us. We are like God, or goddess, or source, or divine, or most high, or whatever you want to call that. And so we have that ability to create, just as the creator created us. So too we can create. We are the offspring of the creator. So he says, no, you've got to bow to this thing. And Lucifer goes, no, I'm not bowing to that. So he's cast out with a third of the heavens, and they go off-piste, so to speak. And then then there's various other falls, because then they go into the Garden of Eden, and then we've got Eve, who's like a lower version, because they've already fallen away from the original Adamic blueprint. And then they've got the snake, and they've got the apple, and then they go, and it goes on, and there's all these different falls. So, but basically what we're doing is we're getting disconnected from that higher pure source of light. So the system of things, which is the best way of putting it, that we live in, which isn't just this planet, it's actually our local universe, if you like, on different realms, because we know it's not just physical beings that are here. We know that. So we know that there's angels, and there's paranormal things, and there's ghosts and all kinds of stuff.
Oh, yes, I know.
Malevolent, and you all know that. So in this system of things, we're actually detached, like a rudderless boat that's detached from the mothership, going round in circles. We're cut off from that higher light and that higher understanding. And actually, that's why we're here, to bring in that higher light. So, Dave just said, you said he won't bow to clay bodies. Yes. So we're cut off from that light, and within the teaching of the Pistis Sophia, it talks about what's called the archons of the eons, and they are the lower gods with a small g, and they are the lower gods that create greed and war and competition and all of this. Then they're really nasty pieces of work, and we start to learn about them and who they are, and actually they're very, very powerful. They're way more powerful than we are in our current a sleeping state. As we begin to progress and awaken, and we become moved by the spirit, and we become filled with spirit and light and love, we will become more powerful than them. But at the moment, there's this whole kind of fight going on, if you like, between good and evil, between the forces of Michael, who is our defender, and these archons, these lower gods. And that's what's playing out. And it's all coming to an end now, which is why the world's going crazy, because we're coming through the end times. Well, the end times are a new beginning time to move on to a new
we
state.
are so much on the same page here. All this stuff we're talking about. Go ahead.
So anyway, within the Pistis Sophia, it talks about what happens to the souls and how the archons can get hold of the soul if it's succumbed, because it's like that devil on one shoulder and the angel on the other shoulder, and which one you're going to listen to and which way you're going to go, which is what this film is kind of talking about. Do you go towards the light to try and make the world a better place, because you want it to go into a place of love and compassion and forgiveness and gentleness and kindness and faith and all of those? Or are you here to make as much money as you can, hurt as many people as you can, greed, competition, consumption, and just screw it up for everybody because you don't want to remember all those lives? So it's kind of like it's not quite as clear cut, obviously, because we've all got both, but it's like, which path are you taking? Are you taking the upward spiral of light or the downward spiral into chaos? So what it's saying is, if you've chosen downward spirals into chaos, you have not received the mysteries, you haven't sought for the mysteries, you haven't sought for the light, then the archons, when you die, there are receivers of your soul, which are called paralemptors within that teaching, and they receive the soul. And this is really similar to the Bardo, the teachings of the Bardo, the Tibetan Book of the Dead and the Egyptian Book of the Dead as well. Every belief system has its Book of the Dead, and there's stages you go through. So within the Pistis Sophia, the archons can take that soul and torment it and cut it off, but they can never take it completely, because the soul is infinite. It can be tortured and captured and all of those things, but it can be released, which is why when people pass over, we do like prayers or ceremonies or things for the soul, even if you just light a candle and ask for that soul to rest in peace. The Jewish tradition do the Psalms, which is our Book of the Dead. We can work with sacred names, but when we do prayers for those who've passed, we're actually making sure that they can go past all these lower gods that would torment their souls, so they can go straight into the light. So that's a whole teaching, and I think it's very much in alignment, by the sounds of it, with this film about the dark and the light, and with what we know about the infinite soul. So the soul is infinite, and the soul can't really be damaged or anything. But we get damaged, and then that trauma carries on into the next life. But we can clean and clear all of that at the soul level. It's pure joy.
No, I agree with you, because I believe I had a near-death experience as a toddler, but I've always been drawn to them. I have studied them for over 40 years, professionally as well as personally. I also say in my career early on, I was so blessed to be there at the beginning of life hundreds of times. I worked in the NICU, labor and delivery, and the maternity ward. Then I worked out in the community. I was a community visiting nurse and did a lot of high-tech stuff and things that was very exciting. Wasn't quite critical care. But I think the most rewarding part for me, and I almost didn't take the job, was I worked on my own in the most dangerous, low-income part of our city. Murder, drugs, prostitution, the destitute of the destitute, homeless. And I thank God for that, because that was one of life's biggest teachers for me, including, though, I always said I've always felt so deeply honored to have families ask me to be there as their loved one transitions back home, as I call it, terminally ill. And I think some of the biggest lessons, and I talk about this lots on my show, that, I've looked after people from all walks of life, and there's been many wealthy people, and I can tell you 95% of people have so many regrets, because they realize that all that money that they strove to create or make, or, that, and not following their dreams. When I have enough money in the bank, or when I retire, or when I lose that 30 pounds, or the things people mostly regretted was they never told the people around them how much they loved them, and they wish they would have told them many times a day. That they would have spent more time with family. They would have spent more time laughing and enjoy. I don't think I ever met one person that was, ruined that they didn't make enough money, or they didn't have a big enough house, or they just realized, like, the old saying, you can't take it with you. Some of life's greatest lessons, I'll tell you, I learned as a nurse, and I can't go back with my back the way it is, but I'm still, very active in other parts of nursing, just even with what I'm doing now. But it was really great lessons that life taught me. I seen you writing something down, so I'd love to hear your thoughts on that.
No, it's just interesting when you said about you can't take it with you, and the regrets. And I've always said that to people when they're sort of saying, oh, but I can't do this because of that. And I go, you know what, when you get to the end of your life, and I've known this from just being around older people who are kind of getting ready to go, if you like, you don't regret. And I used to do this in therapy for people who are afraid of making mistakes and getting something wrong. And I used to say, when you get older and you're on your deathbed, you won't regret the things you tried that went wrong, or the mistakes terrible mistakes you made. You won't regret that. You'll regret the things you didn't at least have a go at and try. And I think there's a line in my novel Red Dress that says something about you won't worry about you don't shuffle off this mortal coil thinking, thank goodness we bought that nice sofa. You just don't. It's just not important in the great scheme of things. Okay, that was a nice sofa at the time, but so always said, if you have money, spend it on experiences and connection, because we all want connection, and those are the things you really remember, isn't it? You remember the great birthday party, or that time you went to the beach, or that fantastic holiday, or that Christmas, or whatever. Those are the things that we remember in our hearts, so these experiences. We don't remember that very expensive whatever it was we bought. And I loved what you said as well about going back home, because I believe that's true, that we come here and when we die, we go back home. We're not dying at all, we're just going into another phase. And I love this analogy of birth, that when the baby's in the womb, it doesn't know anything else except the womb. And then when it's born, has to go through a traumatic experience of birth, and it's probably thinks it's dying with all the squeezing of the womb and all the
Yes.
rest of it, and it's a quite horrific experience. When they come out the other side, they're confronted with this world and the beauty of this world and the beauty of their mother's face, and they can smell and taste and see, and it's so much bigger than what they were experiencing in the womb. They have to come out their comfort zone of the womb to come into the world. But then I think as when you're an innocent child, innocent baby, before anything's happened, you know, you're in wonder and awe and bliss. And we can
and
think
they have that look, I can tell you. Well, you're a
Yeah.
mother as well, but even as a nurse, and you've got this little one that was born early and sick, and their eyes are like, I don't know if I could read their thoughts, but it's like, where am I? What's happening? Why? I've never felt things like this before. It was just incredible. I wanted to share very quickly, I'm writing 3 books as well, but my third one is collecting mostly experiences from nurses, first responders too, but sharing these stories of the incredible, amazing, phenomenal things that we witness when we're at the bedside with patients, especially as they transition out of this lifetime, and talking about something called the gift. Now, on our next conversation, I'll have to explain that, because I want you to finish your thoughts there. We've got a few more minutes. Only it goes by too quick.
It does. It's gone so quickly. We've still got so much to talk about. I'm going to have to come back. So there's a couple of other things I was going to say. But so when we're transitioning and passing, rather than think of it as the death and the end and it's final, think of it as you're birthing. You're going through another birth. You're birthing through the womb of space and time into something awe-inspiring. And you think about how light the world is compared to what it must be like in the womb. Imagine that again when you're passing, you're going to go into a much lighter place. So it can be exciting. You know, I remember a friend of mine from England who was very, very psychic, and when she was a kid, she used to live in a place where there was a lot of old people, and she'd say to her mum, "Oh, you know Mrs. Jones at number 9? When she dies next week," and her mum would go, "No, you can't say that. You can't say that." And she'd say, "No, but they've got a big party ready for her."
It is.
And so I do think we have to reframe this. We're not just we don't just finish. It's not like we're on the scrap heap. No, we're going into something way beyond. And I think there's enough past near-death experiences being documented for us to know that. But there was a couple of other things I just wanted to chip in with, and one was when you talked about laughter and joy. And I do think laughter and joy are so important in life. Laughter really is one of the best medicines.
It is.
And we always say, well, you know, when there's laughter, the Shekinah is presence, and the Shekinah is the divine feminine presence of the Godhead or the divine, and that brings this laughter and this joy. And I love this quote, and I don't know who it's from, but I've carried it for 25, 30 years, and I don't know where it's from, but we know how some things just stick in your mind.
Yes.
I read it somewhere, and it said, "Enlightenment comes with a great big belly laugh, and not a knowing sneer." And I really love that. Laughter and joy is really important. And the one other thing I wanted to talk about, when you were talking about the babies that are being born and they're looking in awe and wonder, and I always think of that as the space of innocence, and that's one of the things that I teach and take people into in the Bone Circle, is to take them into innocence. And if you look at the word innocence, it's in no sense, not trying to make sense of anything, just looking at it all and taking it all in that space of awe and wonder. And that's when we can really, really connect to that greatness, to that greater self. So
I just love it. We are almost out of time. Where can people find you? And Bridget, I know we're going to be friends. Like when I was reading those notes, I don't usually go through them, but like I said, I had a few minutes. I thought, I'm just going to go over this. And I was seeing little phrases of things I say or I do. And I thought, oh my goodness. But the beautiful thing about that is, I call it evidential proof, right? You know that we're getting it from source. When you live in South Africa and I live in Canada, we've never really met till tonight, like on video, and we're saying the exact same things, right?
I've got goosebumps, because that's what I say to people. I say, if different people across the world are getting the same thing, it's because we're getting it. It's almost like tapping into the cloud, isn't it? But it's like it's the spiritual cloud, not the eye cloud, or the we're tapping into this higher consciousness field, and we're bringing through the same things, just in a slightly different way, with slightly different words, but we're all getting that same message coming through, and it's confirmation that we're on the right track. So yeah,
So
absolutely.
how can people get a hold of you? What if people wanted to connect once you're online with the Bone Circle? Where can they buy red dress? Like all of these things. How can they get
All
a
of the above. Okay, thank you so much. So the best place to probably start is my website, which is bridgetfinklaire.com, BRIDGET, for Freddie, INKLAIRE, bridgetfinklaire.com is my website, and that will lead you to where you can get the book and also a bit about the Bone Circle. The book is available virtually anywhere that books are sold. So you can get it online as an ebook, you can get it as a paperback, you can buy it from Amazon, you can get it anywhere. The best place to actually go is probably johnhuntpublishing.com, which is the publisher. So johnhuntpublishing.com, if you Google Red Dress, or a novel, I think it's called Red Dress, a novel in the US, or Bridget Finklaire, you'll find a page with my book on it, and you'll see all the reviews on there and the write-ups, and you'll also see links to buy it either in America or Europe if you're in Europe, and either ebook version or paperback, so you can get it anywhere. With the Bone Circle, the website is not live yet, but it is called theboncircle.com. It has got the.
So
I
it's coming. It's coming.
Yeah, so theboncircle.com is coming. You can also find me on social media. I asked that on Facebook, there is an author page for me. I have a personal page, but it's getting quite full. So do find me as Bridget Finklaire, author and spiritual teacher on Facebook. I'm also on LinkedIn, Instagram, and Twitter. Bridget Finklaire.
I didn't look you up on Twitter. I tagged you on Instagram, and
I saw just as I came on this evening. I saw. And interestingly, you were saying that you were looking at my notes, because just before I kind of got like groggy, and it was 5 to 4 or something in the morning, and I thought I'll just have a quick look, and I had a quick look at your Facebook profile, and I had a similar thing. I was going, oh, she does this. Oh, she does crystal. Oh, she does that.
Yes. We have so much to talk about.
Absolutely.
We do.
Completely.
You know what? Gavin has introduced me to the most wonderful, wonderful people. So thank you, Gavin Lee Davies. If you're watching or you're hearing this, I know he'll probably pop in.
Gavin's a star. Thank you, Gavin.
He's a sweetheart. And I want to thank everybody who's here. Dave, you had great questions. Zach, I know you were listening in the background. Those other people, Michelle Million, so probably people on my Facebook page that have commented, I'll see after the show. We go out to all kinds of countries live, so just YouTube's our newer venue, and just because we don't see them on social media, they're on all different servers and platforms, and I think Joe said my show goes up to like 160 different countries, live, and then anywhere where talk radio or podcasts are carried, you can find all of our episodes from UPRN, not just my show. There's shows for everybody on there, so make sure you check them out, folks. So we're talking iTunes, iHeartRadio, Spotify, Spreaker, Podbean, you name it, you can find us on there. If you want to get a hold of me, you can reach out to me on facebook.com/The Angel Rock. I have 2 groups on Facebook, Paranormal University for all things on the paranormal realm, and then the Angel Rocker Tribe for many of the things we just talked about tonight. And as you can tell, it's my passion too. So thank you so much for being here. I am going to give our fellow truckers a huge shout out like I did at the beginning of the show. Drive safely. Thank you for all the sacrifices you are making. It looks like we are going to have kilometers and kilometers, or miles and miles, depending on where you live, of truckers making their way to Ottawa in the Freedom Convoy for 2022 to stand up for all Canadians. I hear even some American truckers are joining us. So it's about time we all got back to normal living again. So drive safe, fellows, and we'll see you when you drive through here in Thunder Bay on Wednesday evening. I want to send you all so much love and light. And I want to thank Bridget again here. I've got a new friend for life here. I know I do.
Thank you so much, Lorilei. It's been absolutely wonderful to talk to you. Thank you.
I just, like I said, I knew before the show, folks, I said to her, you are going to have to come back on. I know you are, because we got too much to talk about.
I'd love to come back. It would be my absolute pleasure.
Well, I can't wait to have you again. Thank you again for getting up at 4 a.m. I'm so glad you were here. And I want to wish everybody a good evening, good morning, or good afternoon, wherever you may be. And we will see you same time, same place next week. And can't wait to see you again. Much love, everybody. Thanks again, Bridget.
Love and light to everyone.
Exactly.